How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back onto the Yamaha VMAX. Missed riding this motorcycle for the last couple days here, so taking her out for a little bit of a ride, and I wanted to kind of address a topic, a question I've been asked a few times, and I feel like I've addressed it a few times but never addressed it super directly. If you guys are not viewers of the channel, you might not know, but I have a few motorcycles. Over the years, I've collected quite a assortment of vintage bikes, new bikes, weird bikes, all that kind of stuff. And today I just wanted to talk about why do I collect motorcycles. You know, what would possess someone to collect motorcycles is something we'll also touch upon. And I've talked about collecting bikes in the past and how I personally don't love how some people collect motorcycles and they don't ride them, and how they collect motorcycles, you know. And in that video I did say, you know, I'm not here to say how you can spend your money, but for me, for what these bikes are, there's a different story and a different reason why I have them. A lot of the bikes I find are motorcycles I get from people that just don't know what they're doing with them. They shouldn't have a motorcycle like the bike that they might have, whether it's an RD350 that I bought, whether it's a T140 Bonneville, bikes that haven't been cared for. I love to save machines that shouldn't see the fate that the previous owner or the owner before that gave to it. And that's like the first thing I love about motorcycles, is just bringing back and being able to save some of these old bikes, right? I love the old bikes and motorcycles just in general, and that's something that's a given most likely. But to be able to save a bike is really cool, because most of the time there's so many people who just part them out. There's so many people who just let them rot, send them to the scrapyard. So if you can find a half decent bike, and if I can put a little bit of work into it, or even just clean it up, wash it and give it a new home, sometimes that's great. Because the previous owner just was sitting on this bike for years, it was for sale for, you know, a year or so, and they just didn't know what they were doing with the bike. So that is one element, and one of the first elements I wanted to talk about, of just enjoying saving these pieces of history. Now this is going to be a given, but obviously I love riding these motorcycles. I love showing them, sharing them, telling the stories, and being able to own them is a massive plus. Being able to buy them in conditions in which I buy them in allow me to own the bikes without having a super big financial burden. Some of the motorcycles I buy are very expensive bikes, but because of how I was able to procure them, I'm in them into a point where I feel very satisfied with my ownership, and I know if and when, or if I was to sell, you know, I would be able to sell it for a reasonable amount more than what I bought it for. Now the financial aspect of it, I just have to say it, I don't buy these things to make money on them, and I want that to be clear. Some people do, which is okay, but me personally, I'm not buying and selling a ton of motorcycles. And you can kind of see that, where I'll selectively sell a few bikes here and there, and most of the time if I buy a motorcycle, it ends up staying in my collection. Right now I do need to downsize a little bit, just because, well, I need a barn like that. But I don't have a barn like that. I don't have a space like that. I just have a smaller garage, which I'm very fortunate to have, and a little bit of a shop. But getting into some of the bigger reasons of why I collect motorcycles, and a big, huge part of why a lot of people collect these things, is because they are pieces of artwork and a piece of history, to be honest with you. When it comes down to something like a BSA Gold Star, at this point, yeah, they're collectibles, and the reasons why they're collectibles are because there's so few of them out there now.
But there's one thing I need to interrupt this video with. We have officially dropped these rotary hats. You guys have been seeing me wear these for almost a year now, and they're officially live on the Vintage Racing Club website.
You know, they make quite a few of examples like Gold Stars and stuff like that. You know, there's thousands of them floating around, but every day there's less and less of them. Some idiot gets their hands on a bike and chops it up, or takes it apart and never puts it back together. There's hundreds and thousands of CB750s that were produced, and yet the good ones are getting harder and harder and harder to find. So being able to own a piece of history, maintain a piece of history, tell the story of the piece of history, and collect them is a really big part of why I enjoy them. Being able to have a fleet of older motorcycles, each with their own story, to me is just so cool. Some people collect bikes because they just like them. They like riding, they like owning bikes, and they form a collection based off of motorcycles that they like to ride. And of course, in my fleet, there's motorcycles that I own like that, where, you know, they're not super massive parts of history or anything like that, but it's just a motorcycle I enjoy riding. This VMAX is a little bit of both. I enjoy riding it, but of course the VMAX is a legendary bike on its own right. The CB900 I own is kind of into that territory where I just enjoy riding it, and that's about it. Well, when it comes down to motorcycles like the Ariel Square 4 or Gold Stars and things like that, yeah, I love to ride them, and I ride my machines because that's a huge part of it. But also, those bikes are history, right? They're motorcycles in which years from now, the care of the bikes, and if there aren't people like me that care for the bikes, won't exist. And to me, that's the biggest shame in the world, because they're some of the coolest bikes ever. You know, maybe I will enjoy riding the motorcycle when it's all said and done, but also it's just a piece of history. It's a rare collectible bike. CB750, GT750 Water Buffalo, GS750. When it comes to motorcycles like that, Ariel Square 4, BSA Gold Star, all of those bikes I am mentioning have a significant spot in history. T140 Bonneville, one of the most iconic motorcycles of all time, is the Bonneville. So when it comes down to some of those motorcycles, I buy them without necessarily riding them or knowing whether I like riding them. At the end of the day, I have fun on most machines, but you know, the CB750 is no better than the CB900 in almost any way. That CB900 is a beast of a bike. There's a place in history for it, and being able to curate motorcycles in a way that very few people, and even fewer people my age, are doing is a very exciting concept to me. And yeah, I like to own them, and yes, I like to have motorcycles, but the bigger part of it is just being able to curate them. And the dream one day is to have a space where I can show them off, show the bikes I've curated over time, perhaps sell some of the motorcycles that we brought from the depths of the depths, the motorcycles that shouldn't have been saved, but they deserve to be saved. Some of the motorcycles where it makes more sense to part them out for profit reasons, and not taking the profit and parting it out and putting it back together. So many of these motorcycles are being destroyed. You know, I see comments very frequently, you know, on the basis of modify your VMAX, modify this, modify that. And many times my answer to that is, man, there's so few of these motorcycles left in nice condition. Like, do you know, you probably don't know actually, what I went through in order to find a VMAX that is this stock and this nice, and all of the things leading up to it. And you know, that's fine. I understand why they say modify them, because a VMAX with a jet kit and an exhaust, I mean, yeah, they sound phenomenal, and I'm sure the power band is great. If and when, I'm not going to come here and say that I'm never going to mod motorcycles, it's more of a when, but a bike like this, I don't see the need or necessity to ruin an all-stock VMAX. If I was to want to build a VMAX, well, I would probably buy one that's a little bit more, you know, molested than this one is. Maybe the paint's bad on it, you know, maybe someone has taken the original exhaust off. I hate to touch such a nice example of a machine. You know, if I was to buy one, you know, to modify, I would buy one that doesn't have the things that this one did. But I went through a long, arduous journey, I mean, honestly, to find a nice VMAX. It took me a very long time to find a VMAX that was up to snuff for not only riding, but price point, but also just all originality. I love originality when it comes down to a lot of motorcycles, but at the same time, mods have their time and place. I do like custom builds, but most people who think they can do a custom build end up ruining the bike. But a lot of times these custom builds just end up in pieces. You know, they just end up never being finished. I will modify some bikes. I will carefully select the bikes that I choose to modify, however, because I do like the curation aspect of motorcycles. And that is a huge reason of why I enjoy collecting these bikes, is being able to tell the bike's story to YouTube is awesome, but then also owning the machine and being able to really get to know it and really be able to express how to care for the bikes. Of course, I learn things every single day. I'm not an expert. My Instagram bio on my motorcycle page quite literally says wannabe motorcycle curator, because I have so much to learn. But at the same time, I do think that I am qualified to own and maintain and operate the motorcycles of history. But every day I learn something about these bikes, you know? I just really enjoy telling the stories of these bikes, in which not a lot of people tell nowadays. And to keep these older machines alive, hopefully one day I'll be able to have a motorcycle museum. That'd be really cool. Or at least a motorcycle something in which people can come see the bikes that I have personally selected for my collection. Or who knows what can happen, I suppose. That's all I have for this one. I feel like that's a good answer to the question I've been asked.